participation in a number of overseas events, and more specifically the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in London. Madam, we recognize the role that you played in the apparent resolution as to what has become known as the Windrush scandal in the United Kingdom. And for my part, and for part, I think for most senators, we appreciate the intervention of the Jamaican government, and specifically today, yourself in the resolution, or apparent resolution of that matter. Thank you very much. Statements by ministers. Announcements.
Laid on the table of the Senate today are the following. Minister Paper number 23 and the Independent Commission of Investigations Indicom Third Quarterly Report 2017. Minister Paper number 24 entitled The Chief Justice's Annual Statistics Report of the Supreme Court of Jamaica for year end 2017 and the Chief Justice's Annual Statistical Report on Criminal Matters in the Parish Courts of Jamaica for the year 2017. Minister Papers numbers 25 through 30 entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues for December 8, 2017, January 12, 22, 25, and 29, 2018, February 5 and 19, 2018. Minister Paper number 31, Minister of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries, Performance Report 2017 to 2018 entitled Sustainable Growth Advanced. Minister Paper number 32, an annual report on audited financial statements of the Management Institute for National Development MIND for the years 2014-15 and 2015-16. Minister Papers numbers 33 through 37 entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues dated February 19, 2018, March 6, 12, 19, and 26 of 2018. The Land Divestment Report for the year 2015-2016, the Auditor General's Performance Audit Report on the Delivery of Public Postal Service, Annual Report of the National Housing Trust for the year 2016-2017, Annual Reports of the Registrar General's Department for the years 2010-2011 to 2015-2016. Development Bank of Jamaica, the Policy Framework and Procedures Manual for Privatization of Government Assets, the Privatization Policy, and the Policy and Institutional Framework for the Implementation of a Public-Private Partnership Program.
Bills brought from the Honourable House of Representatives.
Of the House of Representatives to the Honourable Senate. I have the honour to advise the Honourable Senate that on the 3rd day of April 2018, the House of Representatives agreed to the Senate amendments to the bill entitled An Act to Amend the Protection of Geographical Indications Act and for Connected Matters. Signed, Pernell P. Charles, CD, JP, MP, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally, questions and answers to questions.
Question, Mr. President.
Senator Brown.
Thank you, sir. As you are aware, Mr. President, for 7 months now, I've been waiting for answers to question number 1 on the other paper. 7 months having fulfilled the requirement of Standing Order 16. I've asked a proper question. It appeared to me the minister is not here today. You indicated along the way, Mr. President, an approach to the answers that could be given. I said I'd be willing to take partial answers, but it appeared to me that the failure to provide an answer to the question after 7 months really represent a disrespect for the standing orders and a disrespect by the executive of the legislature, a co-equal branch. And I'm really asking, sir, for some sanction to be taken in accordance with the standing order. If after 7 months we can't get answers to simple questions about people employed by the government, being paid every month by the government, some of whom are more performing political tasks than civil service tasks. But we can't get a response to questions like how many people have been employed as advisors or consultants to the government since March 2016. I can't understand, Mr. President, what is it that could be leading the government not to answer questions that are before them for 7 months. May I urge you, sir, to use your power under the standing order to sanction those who have failed to live up to their obligation to answer, because Section 17 of the standing order makes it very clear that the minister shall answer. The minister has not answered these questions, and it makes a sham of the standing orders. And some people say, oh, don't you know the standing orders only to keep opposition in check? I know you don't share that view, Mr. President. And so I call upon you to act and to insist that the government answer these questions. May it please you, sir.
Leader, do you have any comment to make?
Thank you, Mr. President. It is indeed a regretful situation. We know that there have been times on both sides there were questions when you were on this side which remained unanswered for the term since they were asked. That is not an excuse. That is just to say that I don't necessarily think that it is out of disrespect to the standing orders, but that sometimes these things happen. What I can say, and it is unfortunate and regretful, is that I have been supporting, since Minister Reid, in collating the information and securing it. And we are on our way to having the answers prepared for you. So we have made some progress, and I'm hopeful that if not at the next sitting, the one thereafter, we should have the complete response for you. So, Mr. President, craving your indulgence for this additional time, the period is regretful. It is not the sole occasion, and we are not the sole offenders. And while that is not an excuse, and certainly shouldn't justify, I simply raise those points to place it in context. Thank you, Mr. President.
Leader, you know, as alluded to by Senator Brown, I had indicated that we could take, if it's not completed, I would ask that at if not the session that we are proposing for Wednesday, on Friday, that you at least present some partial statistics if they are available, if the complete thing is not completed. Thank you.
Am I to understand that they're going to be a sitting on Wednesday and Friday, so the information will come on Friday? Because the minister is saying at this next sitting after. So it appeared to me, and if they're saying Friday, I'm comfortable in waiting for the full answer, if that's the intention. But I'm also fearful, given the experience between the time of the last sitting of the Senate and today, that the next 2 sittings may be weeks upon weeks away. So I'm concerned, but I will wait for Friday if that's their position.
Yeah, what I'm aware of is that there is maybe a sitting on Wednesday which would be considered an extraordinary one. And that is why I said the sitting which is proposed next, which may or may not be on Friday. Leader, thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Brown. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to the sitting of the Senate. Motions for leave to introduce bills. The presentation of bills without the leave of the Senate first obtained. Public business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, it is intended today to open the debate on the long-awaited Road Traffic Bill 2018. Mr. President, in 2017, there were 321 deaths on Jamaican roads. And of these deaths, 140 of our young people were lost, persons under the age of 34. Mr. President, so far in 2018, the figures are alarming. The Ministry of Transportation's Road Safety Unit has indicated that 96 persons so far have died in 85 fatal crashes between January and April 23rd of this year. Most of these fatalities were pedestrians, motorcyclists, and drivers of private motor vehicles. Also included were private motor vehicle passengers, pedal cyclists, pillion drivers, PPV and commercial motor car passengers, PPP drivers, and one commercial motor car driver. And I name all of those categories just to make the point that everyone is affected by safety on our roads. Whether you are on foot, on 2 wheels, or 4, road safety is everyone's business. These figures, Mr. President, are way too high, and they demonstrate the importance of road safety to us quite clearly. The cost, Mr. President, the cost to families, and the economic cost to our health sector and to our infrastructure, all too high. It has been reported that deaths and injuries on our roads in 2018 are largely due to speeding, disobeying traffic signs, swerving, following closely behind the vehicle in front, and the failure to keep left due to distractions such as talking and texting and even watching DVDs, if you can believe it. But we've all seen it. We've all experienced the indiscipline on our roads. This has to, Mr. President, change. We have to do better. As road users, individually, we all need to take responsibility for our safety and for the safety of others on the road. And as members of the Senate, we now have the opportunity to play our part by bringing into force a new regime to promote and enforce safer use of our roads. Sorry. Mr. President, I recall that last year Jamaica participated in a week of activities in an effort to bring road safety issues to the forefront of our minds. Commemorating the United Nations Global Road Safety Week and under the theme Save Lives, #Slowdown, the focus during these activities was on reaching out to drivers to manage their speed in order to avoid injuries and death. This year, we must continue to reach out to our drivers and road users and implore them to follow the road code, speed limits, and safety procedures. Because of this culture of indiscipline on our roads, however, we also need our long outdated laws to be in order, to ensure better order and the enforcement of order on our roads. We must today and hopefully next week again take the important step of revamping our legislation so that we protect our road users, including, of course, pedestrians. I just want to share some global figures from the WHO to emphasize the issue at hand. More than 1.3 million people die each year as a result of road traffic crashes. Half of those dying on the world's roads are quote-unquote vulnerable road users, pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists. An adult pedestrian, his or her risk of dying is less than 20% if struck by a car at driving at 50 kilometers per hour, and almost 60% if struck by a car driving at 80. Wearing a seatbelt reduces the risk of fatality among front seat passengers by 40 to 50%, and of rear seat passengers by 25 to 75%. Wearing a motorcycle helmet correctly reduces the risk of death by almost 40% and the risk of severe injury by 70%. Drivers using mobile phones are approximately 4 times more likely to be involved in a crash than drivers not using a mobile phone. Road traffic crashes cost most countries up to 3% of their gross domestic product. I pause here to note as well that injuries from traffic crashes account for a large portion of the budget for treating trauma in Jamaican hospitals. Without sustained action, road traffic crashes are predicted to become the 7th leading cause of death globally by 2030. The newly adopted 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development has targeted halving the global number of deaths and injuries from road traffic crashes by 2020. So apart from the human and local imperative, we must do our part in reducing the number of road traffic crashes in Jamaica. So as we debate this bill, I urge us all to remember not only these figures, but the very human and harrowing experiences of persons losing loved ones in tragedies caused by unsafe road practices. And in this context, Mr. President, I'm pleased to present to the Senate today the new and improved Road Traffic Bill 2018. The Road Traffic Act which we are using, Mr. President, was promulgated in 1938 and has long outlived its usefulness in the motor vehicle industry. Over the years, there have been numerous amendments to address different matters in keeping with certain developments and trends, but they have been insufficient to keep pace with the challenges that are faced by Jamaica's road users. In fact, several deficiencies have been highlighted that are believed to contribute directly to the indiscipline and levels of conflict on the nation's roads. In order to improve safety, therefore, control and regulation of our roads, approval was sought and received for an overhaul of this 1938 Act, with the intention of replacing it with a new act in keeping with best international practices for road safety. The new act consolidates amendments made over many years, but goes further to address the many modernizations and technological changes that have occurred relevant to motor vehicles since 1938. The process has crossed administrations and included consideration by a joint select committee. The 2018 Act, Mr. President, will reflect several modernizations. Language has been simplified, arrangement of provisions has reorganized. The bill presents the provisions in a more uniformed and user-friendly manner. Example, all offenses have now been set out in schedules for ease of reference. And additionally, much of the detailed information of operational information has been removed from the Act and will be placed in regulations. This will also allow for flexibility in updating. Mr. President, the road traffic bill was passed in the other place on February 6, 2018, with amendments, and some further amendments will be introduced today. A list of amendments has been circulated, which has a somewhat daunting appearance, I must say. But as I say to colleagues, not to be alarmed, primarily the length. They're here. They're here. There should be. Please check, and if they're not, I'd ask for them to be circulated. Oh, they didn't get. The copies are being made. The copies are being made. My apologies. They'll be circulated shortly. The copies are being made. But they had been circulated by email earlier in the week. But you'll get the hard copy today. The length of the amendments primarily lie in Schedules 1 and 2, which is where the offenses are set out, dealing with ticketable offenses, fines and penalties. There was an alignment issue, which caused there to be errors in references, and there have also been 1 or 2 anomalies in respect of fines that have been corrected. So that took up maybe 24 pages, just those 2 schedules, making sure that they were replaced in their entirety. Schedule 3 also has been amended to ensure that the license duties which were implemented in 2017 by the Provisional Collection of Tax Road Traffic Order, that those are provided for in the 3rd schedule. In the 6th schedule, there are updates in respect of the demerit points which are applicable to the offenses under overtaking in clause 57.5, and in respect of the wearing of protective helmets by motorcycle drivers and riders and pillion riders under 74.3. In respect of the 7th and 8th and 9th schedules, which deal with the composition of the ITA, the functions of the ITA, and the members of the ITA, most of the references are just changes to subsection, the word subsection changes to subparagraph, etc. And there's been some consolidation by moving some provisions from the 9th schedule, which deals with members, to the 7th, just for flow and cohesion of the ideas being addressed. In the amendments, we've also made some changes to the definitions so that a definition of permit or driver's license has been split into two definitions. So the permit, which refers to a learner's permit, and the driver's license, which are now properly defined under the Act. Similarly, driver's license register, national vehicle register, road code, the definitions were circular, so they have been adjusted. The language has been adjusted, but no policy changes there. Definition of motor vehicle has been included because the definition previously referred to Clause 6, but Clause 6 really sets out the classifications of motor vehicles. So now that has been supplemented. And similarly, the language which addresses the classifications of vehicles in respect of passengers under Clause 6, that has been amended to simply refer to persons for simplicity and clarity of what is being stated. Before, the language spoke to passengers excluding the driver, which sort of was unclear. Now it speaks simply to persons. So a vehicle that carries 7 persons versus how many passengers plus driver, etc. So there have been no policy changes in the amendments. I think there are 1 or 2 that will probably require a little more discussion further on, and those would relate to the language which has been changed in respect of Clause 22, which deals with diseases, prescribed diseases and disabilities which are treated and have been treated in a particular way in terms of allowing persons access. So the tests that are applied and the structure has been improved. That clause is in fact now 3 pages long to ensure that there's a transparent framework to ensure that the matter is treated appropriately and in a modern, inclusive way. Clause 22. So I point that out specifically to you, sir. I know you will come with some edifying thoughts. Or I'm hoping that with the amount of work that was put into it, your imprimatur, which is highly valued. Yes, so we're looking at that. And another one, which is of course of note and of import to many people, will be Clause 122, which deals with the use of, 121, which deals with the use of electronic devices, communication devices, while driving. I know that I've heard in public discourse where persons have looked in the schedule and simply seen a fine attached to, and a penalty attached to use of an electronic communication device while driving. And they have thought that this means that you cannot at all use in the schedule. But I'm speaking to Clause 21, which is on page 10 of the amendments. So it's being amended because what we wanted to make clear is that you can use it in hands-free mode or with Bluetooth, etc. So what it is, you cannot hold it up in your ears like you see people driving on the one hand on the road, or talking into it with driving on the other hand, and somehow presume that you are giving sufficient attention to the road and paying attention to road safety. So we have made the language technology neutral, clearer, and have ensured that the concerns that persons have been expressing in the public about ensuring that we have a provision that can be enforced in reality and not one that will be enforced in the breach or accommodated because it becomes impossible to comply with. So we have sought to make that balance in the amended Clause 121 provided in this list. So, Mr. President, I want to just highlight some of the main provisions of the bill, although I've just touched on 2. Fundamental to how the bill treats with matters is that it addresses changes in the type of technology used in the design and construction of motor vehicles, traffic control systems, and communication devices, which of course we agree had way outpaced the legislation. So the 2018 bill addresses issues not only the use of devices while driving, but it updates provisions related to matters like classifications, light indicators, etc., which might be touched on in the clause by clause. I've already addressed the matter of hands-free mode. So again, I want to make clear that it prohibits use of electronic communication devices other than in hands-free mode. So that means no texting and no WhatsApping, of course. But it certainly will allow you to speak if it is that you are not holding the device. And the issue of technology is crucial to this bill, not only in this limiting sense, Mr. President, but also by enabling the use of technology by the road safety architecture. So ticketing processes will be able to use electronic databases and systems to ensure a more efficient approach to generating information on a driver or owner of a vehicle, such as licensing and insurance information. Of particular importance is that electronic issuance of tickets and notices will become a reality. Gone will be the days when persons can simply rely on tickets being lost, quote unquote lost, in order to evade penalties and fines. The language again continues to be technology neutral, so it doesn't bind the government to any particular process or technology, and should be flexible going forward as technologies change. We note, Mr. President, in particular, that clause 115(1)(c) provides that any notice under the bill can be sent to a person by electronic means. And 129 says that anything the authority or the minister is required or authorized to do or provide under this act may be done or provided by electronic means or in an electronic format. So Jamaica is finally taking steps towards a digitized world with regard to our road traffic systems. This is an excellent move, Mr. President. Also connected to the use of technology and ticketing systems is the improvement in how we will be able to enforce fines and penalties for traffic offenses. So the enforcement process will be greatly helped by the ability to track offenses, suspensions, disqualifications, penalties, and fines, as the information on these issues will be readily available to the authorities through new databases. In this regard, the driver's license register and the driver's offenses register will not be paperweights or dust gatherers, but important parts of the enforcement support toolkit. The practice of simply not showing up for court in order to avoid facing the consequences of bad driving will no longer work. The placing of responsibility on the owner of a vehicle, Mr. President, for how his vehicle is used is also a much-needed improvement. Owners will have to keep a record of every person authorized to drive or operate their vehicle, and to provide this information on the identity of a driver who commits a road traffic offense. And this will allow the authorities to track infringements through licensing and ownership of the vehicle involved in traffic offenses. Again, this tightens the net of evasion. The bill establishes, as I've just mentioned, a national motor vehicle register to capture the entire stock of vehicles in the country at any point in time. Currently, the motor vehicle count in Jamaica is inaccurate because the Island Traffic Authority and the Tax Administration carry different figures on motor vehicles registered for different reasons. So there is no way to ensure that you have a true sense of what is on your road and how to plan for it. So this register, when it is fully functional, will have records of both on-road and off-road vehicles. All vehicles imported and otherwise will be, will be captured. Mr. President, provisions are included that will reduce the burden on the court system through expansion of the traffic ticketing system, allowing offenders more time to pay traffic tickets at the collectorate, which of course can also be done online, and the strengthening of the Road Traffic Appeals Tribunal. We've also adjusted the fines such that if a penalty is paid at a collectorate, then for a ticketable offense, then that amount is about 50% less than what it would be if you went to court for the offense. So we're hoping there to address the right or left issue, as well as, I don't know, or rather I wish I didn't know. We're hoping to address that issue there, and also to incentivize persons to take the easy route and to comply, get online or go into a tax office and pay what would be a lesser fine, a lesser penalty. The bill has therefore also increased the number of ticketable offenses to support this new traffic ticketing system. So we have reduced the number of offenses that require mandatory court appearance. So this, of course, again, is one of those efforts to reduce the burden on the court system. Another important feature, Mr. President, is that it will be mandatory for all drivers of motor vehicles to have in their possession, when they are driving a vehicle, their license, their driver's license at all times. It will be an offense if a driver fails to produce his permit or driver's license for examination by a constable when requested. These provisions will greatly assist the police in identifying drivers and confirm that they are allowed to operate the vehicles being driven. This will further facilitate also, Mr. President, police apprehension of wanted persons, although that is an additional benefit. And you see it all the time. You read about it in the press, certainly overseas, where persons are pulled over for a ticketing offense, just a traffic offense, and they are found to be wanted on a charge of murder or some other serious offense. Again, we have to use all the tools in our kit. And Mr. President, I know there are persons who say, but you know, why should I have my driver's license on me all the time? Why can't we just keep this provision where you can produce it after? But the fact is, people give an incorrect name, and then they don't show, and then they're lost to the state and otherwise. So we have to acknowledge the realities of how our system has been abused, how the law in effect has been abused, and ensure that we tighten the gaps and close them, and ensure that people are encouraged, and we're not encouraged, made to be lawful and orderly and safe in their use of our roads. So, Mr. President, another key feature of this bill, and again this is on the side of enforcement, is that a motorist will be prevented from renewing his driver's license and motor vehicle's license if he has or she has unpaid traffic tickets. So you can't just run up the tickets into perpetuity, and because you can avoid the warrant or you don't find the paper, if you have to renew your license every 5 years. So at the outside, at the worst case, that is the point at which we'll catch you. And if it is that you are the owner and you have to renew the motor vehicle license, which is of course more regular, we will catch you at that point, because you cannot renew your motor vehicle license either if you have outstanding penalties, fines, fees, or charges. This is, I think, Mr. President, one of the most important tools that is being implemented by the law before us for debate today. Mr. President, you will also not be able to renew your certificate of fitness. Very important if it is that you have outstanding traffic tickets. So all of this running up of fines and then waiting for an amnesty, those days are over with a capital O, Mr. President. And I therefore very much look forward to when we close the debate in this House. Mr. President, another important provision under this Act is that the authority will now be empowered to suspend a driver's license where the holder has incurred a certain number of points accumulated against his driver's license. So, or where he has failed to pay certain fees or charges. So, Mr. President, a person can be assigned demerit points by the authority. And if they have accumulated a maximum of 14 points or more, having paid the penalty, of course, you have paid the fine, but you still get the demerit point because you have conducted, you have offended the law. At a certain point, beyond 14, you can have your license suspended by the authority. So the authority will be monitoring all these databases, these registers of which I spoke earlier, will serve a purpose. They will allow for enforcement by persons, against persons who seek to evade the law. Mr. President, of course, the Road Traffic Appeal Tribunal will be activated to allow for appeals against decisions of the Island Traffic Authority. But again, the issue is we know what has been practiced for years, so we must close those gaps. Disqualification of a driver's license by the court is another aspect of the bill which I wish to touch on. So where a person is convicted of any offense in connection with the driving of a motor vehicle, and these are, of course, the serious offenses, reckless driving causing death, etc., a court before which he is convicted may disqualify that person from holding or obtaining a permit or driver's license for a period of time. This disqualification may be limited to driving of a motor vehicle of the class. So it may be that you can drive a private motor vehicle, but you cannot drive a commercial motor vehicle or carry passengers. But it will be that the court now not only levies a fine or perhaps attaches imprisonment, but it will also be able to disqualify you from holding a driver's license. The court will be required, Mr. President, to submit to the authority information on the conviction for the purpose of endorsing the driver's license or the permit, which will be kept by the ITA for the period of disqualification. And a person who, by virtue of conviction or an order of the court, is disqualified from holding or obtaining a permit or driver's license may, after the expiry of 6 months from the date of conviction or order, or the date of determination of an appeal, may apply to the court before which he was convicted or by which the order was made to remove the disqualification. Of course, cause will have to be shown why it should be shortened. Mr. President, the bill also allows for a simple, predictable process to address seized or abandoned vehicles where owners cannot be located. So our police stations, Mr. President, need no longer become junkyards where people simply abandon destroyed vehicles, never to claim them, or for some other reason where they see fit not to claim vehicles, probably because they are absconding for some reason or another. So there will be a court process that has been provided, and owners will be given the opportunity to recover the vehicle after paying any necessary storage fees, should they not have actually abandoned the vehicle. Mr. President, the bill provides for measures to address matters such as standards for new drivers, which are a little higher in the first year after you have started driving, to encourage best practices, regulation of driving instructors and driving schools, making adjustments to the testing procedure, and adjusting the classes of driver's license. For example, under the new Act, a motorcycle driver's license would now be a Class A license, and a private driver's license will now be a Class B license. And that will include certain provisions in respect of those relating to light, reflectors, and impaired driving, etc., are being removed from primary legislation to be placed in the schedule and in regulations as they relate to more detailed explanations. And just to say that in respect of the Class B license, I think under the current regime, if you have to get a general in order to drive a van, even if it is not for commercial purposes. But now you can drive for private purposes under a Class B, and you must have a Class B for at least 3 years before you can get what would be a general, that is a commercial grade license under the Class C. So there's better alignment of how it is that licenses are used and how people drive in our roads, on our roads, and the type of experience that you should have on our roads. Mr. President, all references to public passenger transport regulatory matters as part of the process to separate the provisions for the regulations of public passenger vehicles and commercial vehicles are going to be addressed under the Transport Authority Act, so they have been taken out of this one. Mr. President, I'm going to do a clause by clause, but not a full one. I've already addressed the definitions, and I think I've pointed out where we can have some, where you might wish to look more closely. Permit and driver's license, the classifications under clause 6 of motor vehicles, how it is a clearer definition for trailers, also included for licensing and registration purposes in the amended definitions. Part 2 of the bill, Mr. President, and I'm just indicating that the bill contains 136 clauses arranged in 13 parts, and each part focuses on a particular aspect of road traffic, and there are 9 schedules. And this order, we hope, will allow for better ease of reference. We know the Road Traffic Act now, to find what you're looking for can be a bit of a mapping exercise. This bill before us is quite different. Part 2 establishes the Island Traffic Authority, Mr. President, which was previously the Road Traffic Control Authority. It's established with a defined board and branches, traffic area authorities in each parish. And it redefines the ITA as a body corporate to be led by Director General as detailed in the 7th schedule, 8th and 9th. The duties, Mr. President, are expanded in the bill to include several of the functions that are now delegated and executed by the TAJ and the NWA, but they are not properly defined in the legislation. So now they are clearly and will be clearly embodied in the powers and functions of the ITA. Mr. President, some new functions have also been identified. They are set out in the Act, and the power to delegate has been modified as well, Mr. President, given that it is now a corporate body. Mr. President, the functions of the ITA are set out in the 8th schedule, including the relationship between the ITA and the road authorities, which are responsible for the maintenance and management of the physical road structures under their control. 9th schedule deals with the composition, as I spoke to earlier. Part 3 deals with classification, fitness, and registration of motor vehicles. Matters relating to the requirement for a motor vehicle to be operated on the roads are addressed in clause 6. The category of invalid carriages has been removed, and the upper weight limit for vehicles classified as motor vehicles has also been removed, and these amendments are due to the fact that invalid carriages are no longer used. There were 3-wheel motor vehicles that were used to carry persons with disabilities, and the upper weight limit for vehicles classified as motorcycles has been removed, as with changes in technology and realities of how motorcycles are treated they're no longer needed. So it's been removed from clause 6. Yes, so it's actually been removed from the existing law because it's no longer a thing that exists. In fact, we only inquired as to what it was when we were going through the bill because it's not something in use anymore. Mr. President, in addition to the basic requirements for motor vehicles to be on the road, there is now a requirement for insurance coverage treated with under this Act. And the proof of it, that you must provide evidence that you have valid insurance at the time that you are requested to provide it by a constable. And this is no longer only dealt with under the Motor Vehicle Insurance Third-Party Risk Act. We're now treating the matter for enforcement under the Road Traffic Act. And importantly, the police will be able to access electronic copies of all the documents relating to the motor vehicle, including insurance, on their database. So in terms of being able to, what you provide and how it is, and your requirement to have it, we're seeking to cover both sides of the spectrum of evasion. Mr. President, the provisions relating to the application for, issue of, and revocation of a certificate of fitness have been simplified, and they're treated with under clause 8. And the details of the application process, the fee structure, and the requirements to be met for a vehicle to be certified as fit, however, will be prescribed in the regulations. Separate provisions are included for motor vehicle registration and motor vehicle licensing to differentiate the processes as separate transactions and requirements. So registration is relevant on your first transaction involving a motor vehicle, and this process will be detailed in the regulations. The registration process for a motor vehicle is completed when all the information on the vehicle is entered in the National Motor Vehicle Register. This vehicle, Mr. President, as I said, will include all information on all vehicles at any point in time, whether they are on and off the road. Mr. President, the 2018 bill allows for registration plates to be issued when an application for a motor vehicle license is received. And the provision specifically assigns the plates to the vehicle, not the owner. So registration plates will now attach to a vehicle and transfer with a vehicle, so that you are always tracking vehicle, license plate, and owner together. This sort of random circumstance which sometimes operate nowadays is over, or will be over when this bill is passed. This is treated with in Clause 13. Clause 14 provides that the duration of motor vehicle licenses and the grace period of 1 month for renewal remains unchanged. That's retained in Clause 14. Clause 15 and 16 address the fact that restriction on motor vehicle license renewal has been incorporated by the point which I made earlier, the fact that if you have outstanding traffic tickets, fines or penalties which remain unpaid, the applicant or the owner cannot renew their license. So these clauses 15 and 16 for your ease of reference. The current Act exempts under Clause 17 fire engines and ambulances from payment of the annual license duty, but the bill allows for the categories of government vehicles that may be exempt to be prescribed by regulation. So this might require expansion at some point. Mr. President, under clauses 18 and 19, we address the fact of fees and duties. At present, all fees and duties payable under the RTA accrue to the consolidated fund. This bill allows for certain fees to accrue to the authority. It modifies the range of fees that may be determined by the minister responsible for finance and introduces a requirement for consultation with the minister responsible for transport in this regard. Mr. President, Part 4 deals with the licensing of drivers, and clauses 20 to 29 broadly address the revised arrangements for the process of obtaining a permit, a learner's permit, or a driver's license. A driver, as I indicated before, if you're a learner, you must have your learner's permit on you at all times if you're in the car, and if you're a driver, you must have your driver's license on your person all the time while driving, both obviously while driving. The physical fitness requirements and the extent to which the Island Traffic Authority can...
Sorry, Minister. Have you given any thought to the possibility of having an image of your driver's license on your smartphone as opposed to the actual card?
I think you can carry evidence. No, you must have the actual... I think the license is specific. In terms of the... Yes, but I think because the driver's license will be endorsed, and there are things like if you have lost and it's actually a replacement, it should be marked that it is a substitute, and the endorsement of the points, etc. But in terms of your carriage of evidence of your proof of insurance, for example, that may be possible. So it's specific for the license, but the bill does contemplate the use of evidence and electronic evidence to show compliance with other requirements. Thank you, Mr. President. I wasn't going to make the point. Mr. President, with your leave. Part 4, still on Part 4. Clause 22 addresses the matter of the ITA granting driver's licenses to persons with disabilities in a process which has been simplified. And the clause has been, as I indicated before, expanded and revised to provide for the circumstances within which persons with a prescribed disease or disability, physical disability, can be permitted to drive. So there are, under the law now, there are particular provisions in respect of, there are excluded diseases. For example, epilepsy. If you have epilepsy, as is prescribed now, you are not permitted to have a driver's license because it is considered to be unsafe for you and other users of the road because of the unpredictability of the disease. Insanity is still under our old law. There may be an issue about yes. What is now provided, for example, there is loss of both hands or both feet or one hand and one foot provided now for in the existing regulations. But these are now being reviewed and revised, and will be placed in the regulations. But the provision for how they are treated and the testing that's required or not required based on the designation of the disease or disability, that has been addressed in an amended Clause 22. And I very much do look forward to your views on the clause and its workability, Senator Morris. A learner's permit is issued on proof of age. At least you must be at least 17 years. But applicants will be required to pass a road code test and a basic medical before the learner's permit is granted. Additional conditions for driving with a learner's permit have been included, such as the experience of your accompanying driver, your breath alcohol content if you are stopped on the road, and maximum speed restrictions. I've already addressed the 3 classes of license and the fact that during the first year of holding a driver's license, your driver will be held to a higher standard of care in respect of breath alcohol content, maximum speed, and driving for reward. Mr. President, the provisions that allow the JDF to test and certify their own drivers as competent remain unchanged. And specific reasons for refusal to grant a permit or driver's license are included. Mr. President, for persons who are 70 years or older, they are required to produce a medical report, and that will be every 3 years as opposed to the 5 which is now provided for. You were thinking it should be 1, Mr. President. Every 3 years you must seek a renewal of your license. And in respect of the suspension of a permit, I've already addressed that matter, and this is dealt with in 31 to 34. Clause 32 provides for a process for retesting of persons who have had their license suspended. Disqualification from holding or obtaining is dealt with under clauses 35 and 36. And there is now a clear distinction between, as a result of the amendments, between the disqualification of a person by order of the court and suspension of a permit or driver's license resulting from the accumulation of the merit points where a holder has failed to pay fees or charges required under the Act. And this suspension is carried out by the authority. So the court can disqualify, the authority can suspend. Mr. President, the driver's license book is replaced by the register, which I spoke to earlier, that's under clause 40. And licenses issued to replace lost, stolen, or destroyed or defaced licenses will be clearly marked as substitute, so that in the register and on the piece of identification, and the authority can have on record and a constable can recognize that there have been more than one valid license issued to this same person. Mr. President, provisions related to the use of foreign driver's licenses to operate vehicles on Jamaican roads addressed in 42 and 43, and 44 treats with the use of driver's licenses fraudulently obtained or by a person other than the holder. That 42 and 43, right. I think I had a misalignment here. 42 and 43 treat with that matter. And then clause 44 deals with the Road Traffic Appeal Tribunal, modifying matters related to the Constitution and operation together with the 4th schedule of the bill. Mr. President, Part 5 deals with the road authority, road traffic signs, speed limits, and rules of the road. It deals with installation of facilities for pedestrians and cyclists, sidewalks, cycle lanes, etc., and the responsibility for prescribing traffic signs. It provides that the road authority may restrict or prohibit traffic on a road requiring maintenance, and it provides for restrictions on advertising signs on roads or damage of road traffic signs, and importantly, for the recovery of costs incurred for enforcement actions. Mr. President, it's my time.
Mr. President, may the member's time having expired, may it be extended to allow her to complete her presentation.
Question is that the minister's standing orders be suspended to allow the minister to complete her presentation. In favor? Against? Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Scott Motley. Mr. President, the provisions related to maximum speed which motorists may drive are broadened to include the various ways by which a maximum speed may be established, the erection of related signs, and the prescribing of measuring equipment. The exceptions for emergency vehicles and constables carrying out their duties are set out, and this is Clause 55 and 56. Clause 57 treats with the general rules of the road which are maintained, although there are some changes. For example, the current Act says that a motor vehicle shall not be permitted to travel backwards further than may be necessary for turning or other reasonable purposes. And you know that there are people who reverse a long way down a road, which is clearly unsafe, but somehow find themselves to fit within this rubric because they say that it is necessary. Well, so now this act provides that a driver while on a main road, so for our skilled reversers present, a driver while on a main road shall not be permitted to travel backwards further than 2 vehicle lengths for turning or other reasonable purpose. It is. It is. The very same, Senator. Part 6, coincidentally, deals with reckless, careless, and dangerous driving. The bill retains the substance of all existing provisions, Mr. President, with some modifications to structure and presentations for clarity, and those are addressed in clauses 58 to 65. Part 7 deals with driving under the influence of alcohol or other drugs, and all provisions related to impaired driving have been set out in the 5th schedule rather than the body of the bill. And you'll note, Mr. President, when you look at this point, that alcohol is treated quite specifically with measurable amounts that are permissible. But because there is not yet a clear technologically sound means of assessing, for example, how much under the influence of ganja a person might be, those clauses are still broad in provision and simply addressed as driving under the influence and impaired driving. So that is dealt with under the 5th schedule, Mr. President, although the offense is created under the bill. Mr. President, Part 7 deals with special provisions regarding motor vehicles, such as the prohibition of driving a 2-wheeled motorcycle on 1 wheel. Perhaps Senator Braham, this might concern you as well. No changes being made to the restrictions of drawing of trailers. Again, Mr. President, the bill is about safety. It's about safe practices, not about embedding things which persons may currently enjoy freely on the road. It is about ensuring that our roads are used more safely. Mr. President, clauses 69 to 70 address the duty of a driver to stop and give his information where a collision results in injury to an animal or in damage to property and road infrastructure. That doesn't now exist. Mr. President, Clause 71 addresses the required fittings on a motor vehicle, which are now going to be incorporated in the regulations, and the use of protective devices, seat belts, which are omitted for police, and the requirement for helmets for pedal cyclists as well as pillion riders are addressed under 72 to 74. Mr. President, clauses 75 to 7 now include provisions as how school safety zones and construction zones are established. And this is important because reduced speed limits may now be enforced in respect of both types of zones, for the safety of workers in respect of construction zones, and for the safety of our children and other pedestrians, users of areas within the proximity of schools. for our extremely important. Agreed. So these are sections, clauses 75 to 77. The unlawful use, of motor vehicle remains, Mr. President, under clause 78, but the specific penalties to be applied on conviction are no longer included in the Act. Part 9 deals with traffic wardens, pedestrian crossings, and the parking of motor vehicles, Mr. President. So provisions related to traffic wardens and school crossings and school crossing wardens are retained. They remain the same and are found under 7981. But the procedure for establishing pedestrian crossings is now to be set out under the regulations, thereby simplifying the provisions on the bill, which are relevant and found under clauses 82 to 84. Mr. President, the bill includes provisions governing the interaction of pedestrians and vehicles and sets out the rules that pedestrians should observe when using a roadway, as well as motorists approaching a pedestrian crossing. Mr. President, the local authority makes rules related to parking places, parking meters, and the use thereof, and the existing provisions are retained under clauses 85 to 86. Mr. President, under clause 87, the authority retains responsibility for preparation and publication of the road code to provide guidance for persons using the road. And under 88 and 89, no significant changes have been made to prohibitions of riding on the outside of a motor vehicle and governing stationary motor vehicles. Mr. President, matters relating to racing, sport, and speed trials are incorporated in one clause, with the role of the road authority, local authority, and the police being set out in clause 92. The focus is on safety, with no differentiation being made between events involving motor vehicles, bicycles, or pedestrians. Mr. President, the obstruction of traffic is treated as a separate provision with specific reference to endangering pedestrians under clause 93. Mr. President, I referred to earlier about the ability to forfeit vehicles that have been deemed abandoned at police stations. Clauses 94, 95, and 96 address this matter. That is, vehicles which have been left at a police station in excess of 90 days will now be deemed to be abandoned and will entitle the authority to approach the court and apply for its forfeiture. The application for the forfeiture process allows someone who wishes to contest, of course, to make his case, but it allows for a continuous process of, to prevent the junkyard phenomenon to which I referred earlier. Mr. President, actions that may damage or affect the integrity of the structure of the road are set out as offences, and the road authority may recover costs for repairs from any person so charged, and this is dealt with under clause 97. Mr. President, part 10 deals with demerit points, the demerit point system, and the provision for demerit points to be recorded against a driver's license on conviction for certain offences or on payment for certain penalties remain, with specific references added for notification to the authority from the courts and the police. Offences and the related demerit points are set out in the 6th schedule, and this is treated with, Mr. President, under clauses 98 to 100. Mr. President, you may wish to note that demerit points may be expunged after a period of suspension as well as after expiration. But the provisions governing expiration and the process by which points are expunged will be prescribed by regulation. Mr. President, the mechanism by which demerit points can be amended is unchanged. That is, the Minister may amend by order after public notice in a newspaper and gazette. Mr. President, under Part 11, the matter of weighing of motor vehicles is addressed, and the weight of water, fuel, and accumulators is now included in the unladen weight. Descriptions of laden weight and axle load are now added, and this is clause 101. Mr. President, a separate provision is created for the offence of operating an overloaded vehicle, and this is treated with under clause 102. Mr. President, the existing provisions for the weighing of vehicles are retained, such as the issuance of weight certificates, etc., and these are dealt with under clauses 103 to 4. Part 12, Mr. President, deals with fixed penalties. The traffic ticketing system allows for certain offences to be punished without prosecution. the existing provisions are generally retained, with the time allowed for payment of the fixed penalty extended from 21 days to 30, and further allowed extension of time for payment at increased charges for each month overdue. In this regard, Mr. President, Clause 105.13 states that if the fixed penalty is not paid within 30 days, then a late payment amount will accrue on the first day of each successive calendar month until the amount is paid. So there is no benefit to simply waiting out this period. In addition to the enforcement provisions regarding renewal of your license, the accrual of late fees on your penalty is also now provided for. And if the amounts due are not paid, Mr. President, there is also the provisions for suspension which occur under another clause. Mr. President, clauses 106 to 107 address the National Vehicle Register, Driver's Offences Register, Driver's Licenses Register, as well as copies of entries from these registers, in that their contents are now admissible as prima facie evidence. So as you remember, I stated earlier, Mr. President, this loss, whether facilitated or otherwise, of tickets will no longer stand as a bar to your being required to pay your fee. They will be captured in the system and treated accordingly. So technology will now be the friend of law enforcement once more. Mr. President, Part 13 is a general section. It deals with the general power to make regulations, and it expands the range of matters in respect of which regulations can be made, so forms, licenses, vehicle identification, etc. And there are a list of specified matters that are the subject of regulations which are referenced throughout the bill. New matters include the transportation of dangerous goods, driver's license tests, electronic monitoring and surveillance, licensing and regulation of driving instructors and schools, lanes for public passenger vehicles, and demerit points. And this is treated in Clause 110. The incorporation of standards governed by the Standards Act, Mr. President, into regulations is expressly provided for in Clause 111. Mr. President, inspections that may be necessary to monitor compliance with the Act are specifically authorized by the Minister under 113, and the alternative to a signature where required under the Act is provided for under 114. Various mechanisms, Mr. President, and this is important, I referred to it earlier when I just started, but the mechanisms by which a notice may be served under this Act include being served in person, by registered mail, and electronically, and guidance is given for each method under the Act under Clause 115. Mr. President, Clause 18 provides that no changes are made to the provisions for evidence by certificate, proof of identity, and the charges for removing and storing vehicles. And specific provisions applicable to motor vehicles continue to be applicable to animal-drawn vehicles and bicycles under Clause 119. Mr. President, I already referred to the matter of use of electronic communication devices in detail, so that is addressed under Clauses 121 and 122. And the offences and penalties and trial thereof are treated with under Clause 125. Mr. President, Clause 126 provides that penalties are defined in the second schedule but can also be set by the courts, and fines and penalties under the Act and schedules to the Act, with the exception of custodial sentences, can be amended by the Minister by order subject to affirmative resolution. This is actually an amendment under the under the list of amendments, Mr. President, because the Act as passed allows for fines and penalties to be amended by the Minister, but it did not carve out custodial sentences, which one would expect to be treated differently. Mr. President, actions taken under the Act by the Minister or authority may be done by electronic means, as I indicated before, and this is under Clause 129. And amendments are made to the Justices of the Peace Jurisdiction Act and the Motor Vehicle Insurance Third-Party Risk Act under Clauses 131 and 132. Clauses 133 to 35, Mr. President, repeal the existing Road Traffic Act, but ensure the validity of various forms of subsidiary documents until, of course, the passage of new provisions. And the regulations are far progressed, Mr. President, I'm pleased to advise. there is quite a robust package of draft regulations under, which are being finalized, and of course for some consultation prior to coming here. And Mr. President, under clause, and there's a new clause 136 which is added in the list of amendments, and this is a validation and indemnity clause provided to cover the imposition, variation, and renewal of tax under the GCT Act by the Provisional Collection of Tax Road Traffic Order 2017 that were made pursuant to Section 3 of the Provisional Collection of Taxes. Mr. President, I've already indicated that the first, second, and third schedules required substantive revision largely due to a misalignment issue, and these are treated within the list of amendments. But you'll note, of course, that there are also some fines and penalties have been increased to reflect the realities of the offences. Mr. President, the first schedule treats with fixed penalty offences. Second schedule deals with the offences and the maximum penalties that can be awarded by the court. Third schedule deals with license duties on vehicles, as I indicated before, amended to allow for the new provisional, the new license duties imposed last year, 2017. Fourth schedule deals with the constitution and procedure of the Road Traffic Appeal Tribunal. Fifth schedule deals with driving under the influence of alcohol or other drugs. Sixth schedule deals with the demerit point system. And the seventh schedule deals with the Island Traffic Authority, administrative matters dealing with the authority. The eighth schedule deals with the functions of the Island Traffic Authority. And the ninth schedule, Mr. President, deals with the members of the Island Traffic Authority. Matters which have not been carried forward, Mr. President, include matters related to the licensing of PPVs and commercial vehicles, which were sections 60 to 89 of the existing Road Traffic Act. They will be placed under the Traffic Authority Act to treat with public passenger vehicles. And provisions for drovers, that is animals, under section 104 of the existing act are removed. Those matters will be treated under the regulations. International circulation and convention provisions under section 90 and 91 of the act have been removed, as section 41 deals with what is relevant, which is the use of international driving license in order to facilitate driving here. So, Mr. President, I just, in closing, wish to urge fellow Jamaicans who may be listening and those present here today to remember that slowing down saves lives, Senator Graham. Wearing seatbelts saves lives, Senator Graham. Wearing a helmet saves lives, Senator Graham. Keeping to your left saves lives, and being focused while driving saves lives. And I want to reiterate that saves lives as well. Mr. President, I want to just also repeat the words of our most honourable Prime Minister in the lower house when debating this bill. He stated that the government recognises that while we continue to urge persons to practice better road use, improved laws must be in place to deal with persons who put all Jamaicans, but particularly our most vulnerable, our senior citizens and our children, our pedestrians, at risk. The actions we all take to address road safety must be holistic, and we must all take responsibility. It requires all hands on deck. Mr. President, this ends the clause-by-clause summary of the road traffic bill before us, and I commend this bill with the amendments proposed to my colleagues for their consideration and debate. I thank you.
Was it intended to continue today?
No, Mr. President, it is intended to do no further business today, but to continue the debate at the next sitting of the Senate. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
So the question that I was asking is the question that the debate be suspended.
Mr. President, that is the question. Might the debate be suspended?
The question is that the debate on the Road Traffic Act 2016 be suspended for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Against? Senator Gill.
Mr. President. Oh, sorry.
Mr. President, it is not proposed to do any further business today. Might the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed?
Mr. President, on the motion of adjournment, sir, I would like to make a brief intervention on a very important global occasion that is actually being recognized and promoted tomorrow. Tomorrow, April 28th, Mr. President, recognizes the annual World Day for Safety and Health at Work. It promotes the prevention of occupational accidents and disease globally. It is an awareness-raising campaign intended to focus international attention to the magnitude of the problem and how, as a society, we must promote safety and health, or a safety and health culture that can help to reduce the number of work-related deaths and injuries. Mr. President, it's a very important event, and Jamaica is today, through the Ministry of Labor, recognizing this event through the theme Generation Safe and Healthy. It focuses on a number of areas, child labor, hazardous work, and exposure, and it also deals with not only the workplace, but at home. Mr. President, the International Labour Organization celebrates this as an awareness-raising campaign, which is objective to focus international attention on emerging trends in the field of occupational safety and health, and on the magnitude of work-related injuries, diseases, and fatalities worldwide. It is that significant day to heighten, Mr. President, the awareness of occupational safety and health among trade unions, employer organizations, and among government representatives alike. It acknowledges the shared responsibility by key stakeholders, and it encourages them to promote a preventative safety and health culture. And I believe, sir, Jamaica needs to promote that type of culture for the well-being of our society. Mr. President, safety and health at the workplace is something that we take for granted. Accidents and injuries at the workplace are sometimes not investigated, no records is kept, no data is assessed, incidents or near misses go sometimes unnoticed without even being reported. Mr. President, based on an ILO data, every day in this world, approximately 6,300 people die as a result of occupational accidents or work-related diseases. More than 2.3 million of the global population dies per year as a result. 317 million accidents occur on the job annually. Mr. President, Jamaica would have had its unfortunate share of occupational death and work-related accidents and injuries. We would have lost downtime and man-hours due to stoppages caused by accidents. Our children in the home and at school would have been harmed due to hazardous exposure. Just simple an exposure to chemical a pot of boiling water left unattended. These are issues that we take for granted but cause accidents and serious injuries and harm to our society. I use this opportunity, Mr. President, in this Senate, as a trade unionist who believes in the promotion of health and safety at the workplace, for us to join together in the advocacy of a national occupational safety and health culture. One that encourages and promotes the right to a safe and healthy working environment that is respected at all levels, where government, employers, workers, and the society actively participate in securing a safe and healthy environment through a system, sir, that is defined with rights, responsibilities, and duties, where, Mr. President, it is targeted towards a fundamental principle of prevention. Mr. President, workers and the society on a whole, we must have a freedom of fear to know that we operate in a safe environment. Mr. President, in closing, this government has gone where no other administration has ventured. The debate of the occupational safety and health legislation has commenced in that other place. I have made numerous calls for it to be tabled, debated, and passed. It has been tabled. The debate has commenced. I commend this administration for placing that on the table. But, Mr. President, whilst I use my many calls for its passage, I want to use this opportunity to encourage a particular route, a different passage towards enactment. I am encouraging, Mr. President, that this piece of legislation, that it should go through a joint select committee of this Parliament. Why am I suggesting that? It is an important piece of legislation that should be rigorously analyzed by stakeholders, where we can consider every component, from the rights of workers to the obligation of employers, from measures that will be taken to ensure compliance to achieving the potential of changing behavior. It is an important legislation, Mr. President, that the necessary continuous consultation should take place, where all stakeholders involved should arrive at some level of consensus. May it please you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Gill. Senator Brown.
Thank you, sir. Let me commend my colleague, Senator and trade unionists, for putting this issue on the table for discussion in the Senate the day before the world celebrates Workplace Safety Day. For many years, this annual celebration, and as my friend has said, consciousness-raising celebration has been going on. The truth is, Mr. President, the Jamaican workplace is governed by a legislation, the Principal Act, which was passed in 1943. That is before the majority of Jamaicans got the right to vote. So we must understand that those who passed that legislation were not of the majority of the Jamaican people. Those were the masters, not the servants of Jamaica. And it is too long that we, the servants, are not able to pass a proper Occupational Safety and Health Act. This 1943 legislation was amended in 1961. It is limited. It was done before independence. So those of us who have became independent have not been able to have and see a legislation fashioned by those of the servants who can vote and by those of us who enjoy independence. It is past time that we get our own legislation prepared by those of us in the majority who are the servants. So, Mr. President, we come this year without the Occupational Safety and Health Act being passed. I understand my friend commending the government for starting the debate, tabling and starting the debate. For me, that's not enough. For the majority of workers in the country, indeed, for all the workers in the country, that can't be enough. I, like you, sitting over there and sitting over here, have called over and over again for the passing of an Occupational Safety and Health Act. The country needs it urgently. Both sides, the PNP government, the JLP government, have failed the workers of the country in bringing the Occupational Health and Safety Act to fruition. We have failed. And so, my friend, I can't agree with you that we need to go back to another giant select committee to discuss this bill. If Senator Novel Clark, former Senator Novel Clark, was here, he would tell you and he would pull the minutes of all the giant select committee meetings that was held to carry the bill this far. I want to propose, Mr. President, that that bill be passed forthwith. The discussion be completed elsewhere and it come here for advice and consent. We can then afterwards go and fix any other deficiency. But we need that bill now. We can't continue to live after the 1943 and 61 legislation. We can't. 75 years when the world has changed. And the definition of factories have expanded so much that we need that. So I want to start with that, Mr. President, because the evidence from the Ministry of Labour show that accidents are increasing in the workplace and that the number of accidents needing investigation, looking at the 2016 Social and Economic Survey, show an increase in the number of accidents seeking and in need of investigation by the ministry. So I call for the Occupational Health and Safety debate to be concluded quickly elsewhere and come here for advice and consent. Then we can work. Because, you know, Mr. President, you have heard me describe that bill already. I have to be careful which finger I put up in the Senate. Let me put my hands in my pocket. You have heard me, Mr. President. You have heard me, Mr. President, describe the Occupational Health and Safety Act. I'd rather fold my fist. I have described the Occupational Health and Safety Act as being around from halfway tree clock. That big clock at halfway tree was a little wristwatch. That's how long we have been discussing occupational health and safety until that little wristwatch grew as big as the halfway tree clock. We need this legislation. No more delay, no more procrastination. Bring us the act. Mr. President, another reason why we need this act is that despite the provisions of the Employment Termination and Redundancy Payment Act, which in 1974 addressed protection of people who may be injured, we really have not had legislation protecting the workers at the workplace. I remember writing a column, Mr. President, in the Gleaner about the cost, what is the value of the life of a worker? And I took as comparison a suit brought by a journalist for defamation of character. That journalist was awarded something like, I think, $80 million for defamation. Somebody said something bad about his character. But the life of a worker who gets killed at the workplace, the way we calculate that now is insignificant, would be the reward. And we need our workers and their family to be properly rewarded when they are injured or die on the job. And the law must be passed to protect them. Mr. President, in this Senate, I have spoken about sick building. And I don't want to agree with you about the international situation. But I want to dance a yard before I dance abroad. I've spoken in this Senate about this Parliament. I described it in 2012 or thereabout as a sick building. Today I sat here, and I only come here once a week or when the Senate meets. And the smell from the kitchen was disturbing my nose, not just in a favorable way, but I was sneezing, I had to go to sneeze. I come here once a day, once a week. But the staff of this Parliament is here every single day, except the weekends and public holidays. When I look at the cramped space in 2012, and the number of files that they must contend with and the dust they must accumulate, that has increased. In the name of the staff, not for us, the parliamentarian, we need a new building that fits anything other than a sick building syndrome. And I make this call again because we must have the courage as we discuss workplace safety to say those who serve us in this Parliament need to work in safe and proper environment. And I beg you, clap me for that. Because unless you clap me for that, the government will not hear that we need a new Parliament building that is not a sick building. I don't always beg for claps, but I think the staff want to hear us saying, we support you in the need for proper working workplace. Another workplace, Mr. President, and just before I get to that, let me just say something. I want to commend those employers in Jamaica. I want to commend those employers in Jamaica who practice a culture of safety at the workplace, who put a premium on occupational health, safety and health. I want to commend the backside companies who, as Senator Gale knows, have promoted that culture of safety at the workplace. Mr. President, we have had in the industry some of the best workplace practices, safety practices. Every meeting that Naranda has, and Senator Gale and I are aware of that because we represent different sets of workers there, that meeting must start with what is called a safety share. Am I correct, Senator Gale? Where we explain, and each person says what has been their experience in terms of safety and encouraging safety, so that others may learn and we reduce workplace accidents and incidents. But Mr. President, how can I close a discussion on workplace safety without having reference? And Senator Braham, I hope you support me on this. without making reference to the workers, the resilient nurses and doctors and hospital workers at the Cornwall Regional Hospital. Their workplace have not been safe for many years. And Senator Mattis Amula, you'll be quick to say, under both administration, and that is true. But that doesn't change the fact that on the 23rd of February 2017, RJR carried a story, Close It Now, Nurses Association on Cornwall Regional Hospital, 2017 February, about the same time that the Chief Medical Officer recommended to the Minister to close the main hospital building because it was unsafe and it contained carcinogenic material which caused cancer. We now know that thanks to an industrial action by nurses and doctors following the death of a Cuban doctor and the death of an ancillary worker recently this year, that stepped-up action has been taken to close that sick building at Cornwall Regional Hospital. Mr. President, when you hear a story on this World Workplace Safety Day, that our nurses were coughing blood, that our nurses had to be resorting to bathing in milk and baking soda, when we hear the story of nurses and other people in the hospital fainting, when we hear about skin rash and other medical problems affecting the staff, be they doctor, nurses, ancillary workers, radiographers, security personnel, we know that in our own country, we have not been following and paying attention to the need for greater workplace safety. May this day, tomorrow, may this discussion started by my friend Senator Cavan-Gale encourage us not to be callous, not to be unwilling to respond in the best interest of the staff, of the workers of our workplaces. And I'm disappointed by the way we treated the staff at the workplace called Cornwall Regional Hospital. Mr. President, there has been a call for an inquiry to be carried out into what has caused the problem at Cornwall Regional Hospital. The fact that that call came from the leader of the opposition is no reason not to support it. It is all the reason because it cares about the health of the workers. It cares about what the ILO says we should care about. It says what the government would want us to care about, the health of the workers at the workplace. And I therefore call upon this Senate to support the call of the leader of the opposition for an inquiry, a call supported by the nurses, supported by the doctors, supported by those who care about those who use Cornwall Regional Hospital. I call upon us as a Senate to support that call. Finally, Mr. President, I want to make it clear that no amount of rabble-rousing, whether it takes place in this Parliament or outside this Parliament, should distract us from focusing on safety at the workplace, including safety at Cornwall Regional Hospital. Those who are quick to rabble-rouse, quick to offer apology for rabble-rousing, owes the workers of Cornwall Regional an apology. That's who they should be apologizing to. Instead of getting up in this Senate, in this Parliament, and defending the health and safety of those workers, we saw a distraction from a debate and questioning about the realities of Cornwall Regional Hospital. Mr. President, Words, thank you, Senator Knight, words such as disgraceful, despicable, disgusting have been applied to the rabble-rousing. I hope as a parliamentarian, because I must tell you frankly, Mr. President, when I looked at the Gleaner editorial cartoon this morning, as a parliamentarian, I thought that my trip into Kingston should really be to King's House and to say to the Governor General, Governor General, if the cartoon in the Gleaner depicts the place that I'm supposed to be going at, the parliament of the country, then I'm in the wrong place. I should just drop the letter at King's House and move on. But because I believe in what Martin Luther King said, I know you'll be happy for that, but you will suffer a little more pain here. I believe in what Martin Luther King Jr. said. The real measure of a man ought to be not where he stands in times of comfort and convenience, which is what would lead me to drop that letter, but where he stands in times of challenges and controversy. And on this day, the eve of Workplace Safety Day internationally, my voice is lifted up in challenge and controversy. It is lifted up to say, rabble-rousing has no place in our parliament. What has a place in our parliament is respect for the workers, sympathy, empathy, doing all we can to protect those workers. Sadly, over the last year, in rejecting the recommendation of the Chief Medical Officer and his technical team, the government let those workers down. May we repair that breach quickly by passing in this other place the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and may we in the Senate quickly give it our advice and consent. So much I think that law is needed. You will not even find me raising an objection to it here. I just want that 2018 law to replace the 75-year-old 1943 Act. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Brown. I'm sorry, Senator Morris?
Very much, Mr. President, and I too join to give my support to the motion as ably moved by my friend Senator Gale, and do also support the call or the reaffirmation of Senator Lambert Brown for the inquiry into the whole situation taking place with Cornwall Regional Hospital. Because, Mr. President, the whole situation of occupation health and safety is extremely important for our workers. And as we go into celebrating this International Day in terms of focusing on workplace safety and health, it is extremely important that all workers pay strict attention and to the issue. But, Mr. President, there are two issues that I want to raise within the context of this debate. Because from time to time, it has been reported in the media.
Sorry, Senator Morris, it's not really a debate. We are speaking to the motion. It's not really a debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, there are two issues that I want to raise in this motion. One, from time to time in the public space, we hear of discussions about asbestos in public buildings. And it has caused concerns amongst individuals right across the society, because asbestos, as we know, is extremely unhealthy for individuals who work in buildings that have been constructed with roofing material made out of asbestos. And I think from a governmental perspective, we need to do an audit of all those public facilities that we have to check and see if we have any public buildings that have asbestos there, and with the intention of closing them, because as we know, they are not safe for our workers, and I think that there's an urgent need for that to take place. Another thing that I would want us to look at in the context of this debate, this motion, Mr. President, is the whole regime treating workers who get injury on the job and develop a disabling condition. And that disabling condition can be either permanent or temporary. And when I have come across a number of individuals who have had that experience, and they have complained about what it is that they get from their employers when they develop the injury on the job. And I think we need to look at that whole regime of how we treat with individuals, workers who get injured on the job, to make sure that when these individuals are off the job because of the injury, that they are comfortable and they can afford to take care of their medical expenses. And I believe that as we go into observing this International Day, I think if we are serious, those two concerns that I've raised, we need to bring them to the fore and make sure that we take some immediate action to protect our workers. May it please you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator. Senator Brown, did I say thank you very much? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Senator Morris. The question is that the Senate be adjourned for a date to be fixed. Those in favor? Aye. Against? The Honourable Senate now stands adjourned.